Organisational Performance and Audit Committee meeting today. Do we have any apologies? We have one from Bruce Robertson. Should be everybody. Someone like to move that. Thanks. Councillor Cook. Seconded, please.
Seconded.
Callum. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We have no declarations of interest. Any right now? No public forums, petitions and deputations. Takes us to the minutes of the 14th of October. Which you all have in front of you.
Just going back to that 4, we've had very few, if any, in this meeting.
Yeah.
Should we be asking someone to come and actually try and give us some background or a better understanding of how some of these things are working in the public arena, just to help us do our role? I'm just wondering, should we be proactive in asking people to come in and not waiting for someone to come in which has a concern? So it could actually be more of a positive dialogue than a negative reactionary dialogue. And I don't know off the top of my head who, but I'm just, it's very fast to get through the first part of the agenda, but often there's some pearls of wisdom in there as we broaden our understanding of knowledge and community interactions that may be worthwhile to consider.
Would you explore that? I think it's an excellent idea. It's just some input, and perhaps it's able to be targeted at what we are.
Absolutely.
What we're covering off
within OPAC and its realm, and it could be I don't want to narrow it down, but just something that may actually help us.
Yep, and Bruce might be able to give us some
Absolutely.
insight into that as well. So thanks for that, Councillor McCallum. Good idea. And remiss of me, I had written it down and then I didn't do it. I need to welcome our new acting GM Corporate Services, Amy Kubrick. Amy's also a GM in another space, so she's busy, but we're really pleased to welcome her to these meetings. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to working with her as we go along. So welcome, Amy. Thank you. Okay, so let's go back to those minutes of the 14th of October, please. Thank you, Councillor Cook. Seconded.
Second.
Councillor Beard. Any discussion on those? Corrections? Great, I'll move that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Somebody's phone's going. Just checking that it's not mine. Right, any questions? I haven't had any questions sent through in the appropriate time frame, so I'm assuming there are none. I do have some input from Bruce, but we'll just bring those. They're not major questions, they're just feedback, so we'll cover those off as we come to them. No councillors' reports or chairman's report. Councillors? No. Right, that takes us to item 9, or actually item 1 of item 9, the financial report to the 30th of September. And welcome, Tanya. Look forward to what you've got to tell us this morning. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair. So welcome. We are looking at the first quarterly reporting to the OPAC committee for the end of September 2020 in the format that some of you would have seen at the workshop that we held last month. So many of you might have seen the format, it might be new for some. So I'll work my way through it. I appreciate that this is new, that there may be some questions, there may be some suggestions still as we continue to develop what we're working on, Chair. Page 12, revenue and expense statement. And I'll assume that you've browsed these and I'll highlight and draw your attention to some of the results. If we look to the middle of the page, the operating surplus deficit line, which is something that is key to the organisation's performance, we're showing a surplus there, or that 1,008,000 favourable. So we've changed the format to F and U, away from brackets, to give some clarity to that. So that would suggest that we're $1 million ahead for the first quarter. Now that is positive, but it's not to be read as a permanent variance. if we look in the first quarter, we've from history, we know that we tend to underspend a little bit in that quarter, despite our efforts to improve the phasing, we tend to still be gearing up at that point. The really positive part to this, I would suggest, is the people variance still being positive at the first quarter, given that we did have, a seriously tight people budget in total, and that we had made significant changes to costs in the travel and training areas and such. Now, we would hope that would be the case in the first quarter, but it turned out to be. It is favourable. So we'll look to see how that tracks for the first, into the next quarter as well. But we are, expecting that to stay on the right side of the ledger.
Chair, do you want to take questions on the way through, or do you?
I'd quite like Tony to be able to finish first, and then.
If I can, I'll do them page by page or groups.
Thank you.
The other income is 414,000 favourable. There is actually some commentary. We've perhaps got it a little bit disjointed, but on page 19 we had, in the middle of that document, we had commentary on the revenue and expenditure, and we talked about the fact that in fact our compliance team income for that first quarter was substantially above budget. Income that we can't control in the prosecutions area, but also our monitoring income, our cost recovery is certainly doing better than we anticipated for that quarter. So again, there are changes in that space. It is not going to be any easier to cost recover going forward. So we may see that benefit erode somewhat as we go through. And lastly, investment income. Realised income, which is interest and dividends, 133,000, just a little bit below the anticipated budget. And unrealised income, that's the movement in the value of the portfolio, $1 million. I'd like to point out to council that as at today, we are another $1 million above the opening balance. So $2 million as today for the first 4 or 5 months. So something that we don't control. Interesting to see where that continues to go or reverses based on what's happening overseas, both politically and in the economic environment. So perhaps we'd like to take questions before I move on. Sure.
Assuming you have one, Councillor.
Well, I was just querying the people one, because I know that through the COVID-19 pandemic, we didn't do a lot of travel, and we budgeted that forward. And I was just wondering what the policy was as an organisation going forward, because it would be very easy to sort of slip back into the old way, or are we using that circumstance to use the Zoom calls and those sorts of things going forward in a more strategic way for the business? In other words, we're going to find a new level of doing business and really target about the personal interaction meetings, but using this sort of history to actually help us go forward, which means we don't have people sitting around airports waiting for planes to actually here doing the job or with their families.
So the answer to that is yes. We recognise that going into the annual plan, and have made substantial cuts in this year's budget from previous for both travel and in attendance at conferences and courses. Now that we have to review, because obviously we're an educational based entity. So, but we are trying to use, as you say, the tools that we've got here now. So our budgets are a long way below, very much down on previous years, and we are tracking them monthly. The exec have their eye on exactly those two numbers all the time. So we are under budget on those, and we hope to stay there. It's not to say that it isn't without cost. I mean, obviously there's things that the exec have to go to that are better in person than on Zoom. But yeah, we are, and we're all benefiting from, even in our area, we use contractors to help in different places, and we're meeting up and we're going through issues on Zoom. So we're using it across organisation in a terrific way. Amy?
Yep, no, I'm looking at that.
Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, just in regard to when we're talking, we've got a $1 million surplus there at the moment, but we don't know if it's actually, there's things that could change, or we can't bank that. Can you guesstimate, best guesstimate, can we, is there any
I'd like to-
sort of, yeah, like, okay, that's the real focus, but is it able to be?
Can I suggest that how we plan here is on an annual basis. And so our teams have an annual budget for their amount of work, and how they phase it is they do the best they can. The majority of the work that you're looking at there that's under budget is in contractors and operational costs. So they may just not have been able to start the work, they may not have been able to source or locate the resource to do it at that time. But I would suggest to you that it's still planned work at this point, and that they're still planning to do that work. So I think it's very early to say that it's not going to happen. When we get to February, it's time to say, well, is that piece of work still going to happen? And then we can have a better understanding. But yeah, so I'm not making excuses when I say it's timing. I would just say it's just how it rolls, basically. And we need to be very aware. So what we're doing though is we're diving in there and looking to see if there are any permanent changes within there. And we'll keep track of those and monitor that.
If I may, Madam Chair, so picking up on Jeremy's point, we will have a better understanding of a true surplus or a work program against budget at the 6 monthly, because we've actually got actuals in place. We know exactly what we've got programmed because we're coming into the summer work program. That's why we've got to look here. We've got a better dive in that 6 month period.
Chairman Horrell?
Yes, I sort of looked at the same numbers and the people one. I actually assumed that some of that saving was because we haven't actually filled a number of positions, and that would be flowing through. And the other income, the 414, you already mentioned the prosecution income. Some of that, because we don't budget for it, I'm assuming will probably flow through.
And Councillor Beard.
Yeah, I just got a question or the point that Nicola raised is the house to a degree. So under people, we have got obviously labour, the actual salary component, but we also talk about on costs or associated travel costs or.
All the costs, travel, training, superannuation, all those associated costs is one. So if there is a reduction in people or there's a turnover in staff, of course, all those other costs are lower.
And so at the moment, from a expectation of number of staff that we thought we would have on board at this point, what is our variance in staff number?
I can't tell you exactly, we're just tallying that, but we know more. That's all I could say. There's certainly been changes, and perhaps our GM of HR might have a note and be able to tell us exactly the FTEs today, but I certainly can't, I'm sorry.
Not off the top of my head, I can't, but we can get those figures. There are a number of people made a number of promises about what roles we would hold off recruiting in the as we went into this financial year, and those have been held back. But yeah, I can give you the numbers.
Any further questions at this stage? Thanks, Tony.
So page 13, it's another income statement, but it's based on the group's activities, and it's open to feedback if you find it valuable or you find it of no interest, but it shows us the income or revenue in our 5 key groups, and then the expenditure in those same groups. So it's probably more than anything just giving you an understanding of the magnitude of the different groups of activities we're working with, or the strategic groups, and how they might be tracking. That same information comes through later in a sort of a graphical form, but these are the numbers to support it.
Councillor McCallum? Are you finished, Tony?
I was going to turn the page but I'm open to questions.
Is there any commentary around the two red numbers there, the 50 under and the 75 under, that would be helpful to us to understand? Because one's in regional leadership, so that's in the income side. I wasn't too sure what that was from. In community resilience, I'm just not too sure. Is that?
Yep, so when we provide more information, we do have more questions, so
be better next time.
Yeah, so no, I appreciate that. So community resilience, we start with that one. That is our hazards and our catchment, all that sort of area. So catchment's up a little bit, there's spending, and it's, I do feel that we may see a little bit more coming through from catchment as a result of the floods that perhaps weren't captured there. So it's not significant at this point, but it's showing that perhaps in the past they might have been a bit under. They are, at budget or just on over budget. And the regional leadership one is, again, I would suggest there's a timing thing around charging our various partners for all the activities that were involved.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Thank you.
I'm interested if the U's and the F's and the red as a highlighting mechanism is working. It would seem to be working on that page.
That's good.
As long as you don't pop the F and the
It's you together.
together. Just have to be careful how you spit that out, really.
Yeah, well, it is highlighting.
Start with you. Thanks, Tony.
So the next page, again, a new page of information. So we did suggest that we would be reporting on the government-funded projects. We often call them shovel-ready, but in fact they cover jobs for nature and other things. So you can see there that our full-year budget is anticipated, and at this point we've, it's just getting underway. So as we go on, that'll obviously populate with some large numbers. Capital expenditure, our haven't reported frequently to council on capital expenditure, so we've put this in here. Our budget for the year is 995,000. Buildings repairs slash capex. Land was the remainder of a project around the Waituna area where we had a balance to fund a land project. Sundry equipment for science generally, and vehicles, we have an annual replacement program. That is something that we could perhaps discuss with the fleet manager around whether they're going to be purchasing vehicles or leasing predominantly, so not sure how we'll see that in the next 10-year plan. And again, to date, 34,000 spent on science equipment. Major project expenditure, so something that we've wanted to highlight and has been requested. Can add to this list. It's a key list based on the current projects, but we can certainly expand on it if there's a need. Coastal plan, essential freshwater implementation, which is yet to really get underway. People, water and land, which is now 3 years old as a project, and our very long-running Southern Water and Land plan. We've put to the far right there when these projects started to give you an idea of the investment over time. So the year to date is where we're at, 628,000 spent this quarter, and the total investment there speaks for itself. Is there any questions, Chair, on this page?
Jim Hall?
Well, congratulations, I think it's quite good to have the information. I was a bit confused about capital expenditure, but you explained it's expenditure, that's good.
Sorry.
The things like the vehicles which are normally replaced later in the year, it's probably easier from the government's point of view to track these things, and things like essential fresh water and some of the other projects which are separate and above. I think it is good to have a line going forward so we can just see how they go, so I think that's good.
Thank you. Councillor McPhail?
Yeah, I was just make a comment, Rob, the $10 million spent on those water and land thing, that's quite good to see those figures invested in. Especially when other parties may come over and override things a wee bit at times. It's good to see what the locals have invested, or the ratepayer.
Councillor Beard?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate seeing those numbers, and I did give reference to it when I was in Wellington to some other person from another region, and he was from Canterbury, and he said only 10 million. ECAN have clocked up 70 in their engagement and process. So I guess we might feel we've spent some money, but there's lots of money being spent in this area.
Thanks for that reality check, Councillor Beard, and that's awesome. Really like that page, Tanya. I think that covers off a lot of the questions that have come up in OPEC and other committees, actually, a lot. If there's any suggestions or requirements for what else goes in that major projects expenditure, I would suggest you send them to Tanya and Amy.
Good so far. Does Bruce have any comments so far on this?
Not on that. He was really pleased with the new look and the work that's been done. That was his comment.
Yep.
Thanks, Tanya.
Page 15, statement of financial position, aka balance sheet. Key numbers you might have picked up on is trade and other receivables, 23.8 million. At the 30th of September, that was our rates that had been struck and ready to go. Managed funds, 26 million, and under liabilities, rates in advance. We spread the rates, if you're interested, we strike the rates, but we spread them 1/12 each month in our accounting. And that is why there's a difference between the 23 million and the 14 million. Next page, if there's no questions, page 16.
What's our strategy then with obviously the likely abundance of cash coming in a couple of days? Where will those surplus funds go? Obviously, you're not too far in overdraft at that point, so you might have a wee bit more on the ticket by now. But how do we allocate those? Where are they dispersed in a sense, or held?
Our options, of course, are in bank interest at the moment. I think it would be an opaque discussion to suggest that we put those funds anywhere else. So we do invest with the local trading banks, but we're looking at 1% at the moment.
Sort of just like to go through to the ANZ
ANZ and we do get pricing from the other reputable banks or the banks you would expect us to be investing with. And obviously we have surplus funds now and they run down. We are in a better position than we were last year, and some extra funds, I might point out extra funds from MPI sitting in the bank. It certainly made a difference. That was the Welding Pines contract that was not budgeted for. That money, and when it does earn interest, is actually credited to the trust.
project. Right.
So, tomorrow night or Monday morning, we'll have a better understanding of how the cash is flowing. It's been a little bit slower for rates coming in until now. It's picked up this week.
Thanks. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, not today, but in the future, it might, because I have a view that while there's an impact of rates, it's not as significant into the credit line as what we think it actually is lower. It might pay us to have a look and to see what the rate effect actually is on our cash flow. And then the other, because we invoice about half our income anyway as well, so it actually softens out the impact through. It might, for Alan's point of view, it may be interesting to see that really with the rates coming, we only just get over the credit line, basically. It's not as much as what you would expect. And it's even this year, because we've actually got that spread of rate income, we may find that it's even softened more, but we've got more of a square curve than a peaky curve. So it might be interesting to see how that actually plays out in real life.
Yes, so Council will definitely report back to you on how that is going. As I say, by Monday, we'll have a really good idea. We have funded in advance our drawdown of $3 million from our investment portfolio was in anticipation of both this and our operating deficit for the year. So we've funded that up front, and that has also put us in a better position cash-wise. So, tomorrow is the big day. The funds are rolling in for the next 12 months. Page 17, reserves and funds available. So this was just to highlight to council, I know you've asked questions, you've been interested in the amount of reserves that are restricted or committed, and they're not available for general distribution. And so we've listed here those reserves which total 27.7 million. I've included in that the asset replacement reserve. It is not restricted by council to anything else. It is actually a reserve of council, but that's showing you the reserve funds that are put away for asset replacement. So that's for buildings, plant, infrastructure. It's available basically to fund the next a lot of projects. And as we work forward with our infrastructure strategy, we'll start to understand where that, is there a match or a mismatch in that area? And we have put up the investment funds there as a balance to show effectively what are cash-backed reserves. So I think also that's been an interest of council in the past. We are in a privileged position in a way to have cash-backed reserves. In many places, the reserves are committed to long-term investments that do not enable them to be actually spent. And I think Stephen has referred to this in our workshops, that it's important to have liquid reserves when they are disaster reserves and such.
Councillor McFarlane, you had a question?
Yes, so the asset replacement, that's basically where all your depreciation goes. That's from everything, that all gets lumped into one.
Half of that is actually in the building or buildings, various building reserves. The rest of it is in asset, infrastructure and vehicles.
Oh, sorry, Chairman Horrell.
Yes, just look at two of those. The marine, so we still have 3 million out of the cruise ship?
At the 30th of September, that is effectively the opening balance. So we're just working through that slowly. By the end of the year, that will be quite a lot less.
So the separate rate increases, I'm assuming the catchment includes their disaster reserves, or are they, the disaster reserves seem quite high, so are they just the catchment balances carried forward?
Yes, and we could actually clarify the descriptions there. That is catchment carried forwards, you might call them, or separate, the surpluses.
And the disaster, which would include our general disaster
So the
reserve.
disaster includes all disaster reserves, including the regional $2 million.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you. So, Tony, out of this, how do I know how much money is available if I had to go and get it without going into any of the community reserves which the community has built up? Because I understood that we were about zero.
Councillor, I think the balance at the bottom is sort of the number that we're looking at. It's a very sort of crude way of looking at it, but effectively this is the cash-backed reserve. So the general reserve has two components: a very long-term investment in infrastructure, about 44 million, and then equity after that, and small other reserves like the Southport Reserve. So those balances are quite low, and by the end of this year they were projected to be even lower.
Yeah, I'm just if we're going to budget forward with a deficit for a short period of time, let's say 2 to 3 years, how do I know I've actually got the cash to back that? And that's what I was looking for here, because I thought we had 2 or 3 million, but it was actually depleted down. We were sitting about even.
So there's two, if I can answer that question in two parts. The cash, the choice of how you fund it by cash or debt is Stephen would say, a treasury decision. If you want to keep these reserves cash backed, you would keep the cash in the investment portfolio. What you're suggesting is that after that we do need debt to fund the deficits. Otherwise, you're eroding your cash backing of these reserves. Now, the asset replacement reserve does not have to be cashed back, but naturally, it's a benefit if it is. Many councils would borrow the money for asset replacement. But given that you've set that money aside, there's a sort of a traditional assumption that the money is there.
Chairman Horrell?
No, I think, well, it's a long-term plan discussion, but the one that does stand out there is the steadily rising lease land reserve, which is restricted at this stage, but it's something that's on the radar. So,
It is, it's a valuable discussion and it is part of our longer term strategy. It's actually here to draw attention to that very question. Clean air loans. Yeah, we have taken the previous reports and slimmed them down somewhat.
Thank you.
So, for the purpose of the OPAC meeting, we're discussing the financial effect of the Clean Air project. So we have summarised the number of loans that are outstanding with Cco Council and Invercargill City Council, and we use here their information that they're providing back to us. So the loans are approved by them or declined by them. Their total applications. We have added this movement, this quarter number, just for our benefit to see, are they actually moving those loans ahead? What's actually happening with them? And of course, there are some opportunities where they are recycling, people have paid off their loan, they're issuing new ones. And the loans in default, loans approved numbers are again, the numbers from that council to their ratepayers. Our loan balances with the councils are represented in our balance sheet in a small numbers, some $200,000, I believe. 195,000.
Any questions on that? That's a change of style of presentation for this meeting. So, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, just the Clean Air Loans program, I think was scheduled for 5 years when it first began. It must be nearing the end of that period now.
Maybe.
Yeah, and
So,
and we
the question
allocate
arising from that is, do we continue it? Is it successful? Do we continue it? Or is that for another committee to decide?
That's for another committee to
I think it was
decide.
strategy and policy that were
And
supposed to be reviewing the
As far as I'm
arrangements
aware, there's a review happening somewhere in the system. Chairman Horrell?
if I could just following on from Neville's comments, when that review comes up, that will be a timely discussion because we did allocate quite a substantial amount of money, and actually when you look at that reserve balance, that is a risk going forward. So it's, at the moment, it seems to be almost self-funding because the uptake hasn't been as much as we probably expected, but it is a discussion that needs to be had at some stage.
And on the back of discussions in committees yesterday, that's being discussed, isn't it? So it's actually something that we need to look at how effective it actually is in the grand scheme of things.
We made 500,000 available. So it hasn't been taken up.
And if it's not serving its purpose, then there might be another way perhaps. But it's not for this committee to decide. Thanks, Tony.
Can I just
Councillor Lead.
So just clarifying, my understanding is correct, is that so there's 249,000 of loans outstanding across the province for the two regions. And at one point in the beginning of the process, did we advance funds through to both those two councils?
Yep.
And so in total, you said it's about 200,000 that we advanced.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, I'm quoting off the balance sheet an amount that we hold. We have to discount, we have you might appreciate a time value discount amount. So we show it as 195,000. It is obviously reconciles with the balances.
What I was trying to ascertain though is who's actually funding the 249,000?
It's an advance we've made to them.
Yeah, but the city and Gore were also chipping in, were they not? Have they not chipped in?
Yes, because they, sorry Tanya, if I might, they fund a different part of the loans that the individuals take, so it's a joint venture as far as I'm aware.
Plus a bit of interest in these.
Yeah, one charges interest, one doesn't.
Yeah, my point there, sorry, is that if the scheme was going really well and everyone had sort of used all the funds that were advanced, great. But as the scheme starts to wane or people repay and not new loans are taken out, then the balances wind back. And if the city and Gore are administering the funds, at some point it could it not be all our money that's funding the scheme if we're not keeping an eye on them?
Through Chair, there are agreements as to which funding and look, there is a review that's been kicked off from yesterday, so I think let's leave that to flow through. And then as part of the LTP, we can then work out the way forward. But I'm not aware of any council not doing what they said they were going to do.
No, just getting like an initial enthusiasm for the scheme. We might have put 200,000 and they put 200,000 and someone put 50,000 and so there's nearly 500,000, let's say, and that goes out but then eventually gets repaid. And if the city and Gore are administering it, so they're receipting back more than they're lending out. So at some point, they are back in the money as such. And if the sales haven't said, well, I thought we were funding this at a ratio, at what point do the 200,000 that we advanced into the scheme start coming back to us? If people have more repayments than they're actually borrowing.
I can't quite follow your argument, but
It's about exposure.
there is a clear agreement around how things happen.
Yes.
And in terms of going out and coming back in. And we'll be looking at that as part of this review, I guess.
Sorry, I mean, it's not huge dollars, but it's a principal point that if something sort of was initially really successful and then it's sort of all repaid back, at what point do we get our check back?
So that's set out in the agreement. It's set out, I'm not sure if it's in February or March sort of thing, but it's set out in the agreement around when it flows out and flows back in. So, but we'll be reviewing that and we can have a good discussion once we.
I guess making sure that we're aware that, well, lots of things that we're funding more now than perhaps the others were if there's only 249,000 of loans outstanding.
Thank you.
There is different arrangements between Incargill City and Gore as to how it flows out. A different approach to ICC, but we're working with Gore. Great parts, they're very important to us. But we'll be doing that. We'll be doing that review, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Thanks, Councillor Beard. Thank you for making your point. Chairman Horrell?
Oh, just following up on that, the five-year review's not far away, and that was always planned, that's the time to have a look at all that and what happens.
Thanks. I might move on. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Page 19. A beginning of a series of half a dozen or more graphical explanations of the council activities. This first page is an overall summary for the council as a whole. We've combined our levels of service, some summary financial information, graphs on the same, and then levels of service graphics to give us that one page to look at perhaps how we're going. We've often talked about timing in our budgets and how that might affect our activities and an attempt to draw them together, looking at what the best of the council reporting is at the moment. So at a glance here, it tells us that at the 30th of September, we had 11 on-track levels of service, 7 not on track. Our expenditure, moving across the page, is 21% of our year-to-date budget. And then we summarise our revenue and expense against budget to again reflect the 2,033,000 favourable variance that comes through from the detail to the other pages. Our graphs sort of show that, and they also, in a way, show a picture that the people, operational contractors, while there are variances there, if you look at them graphically, they're not significant at this point. In fact, as percentages, they're quite small percentages. And the grey being the full year budget. Some commentary there that may well have been better at the beginning of the article, but it is there at the moment. And then the levels of service by the group, the current groups of activities, again showing us where those changes, where the on track and off track are. The purpose of this, and as we go into those activities, is also, as I said, to highlight at the back of the agenda, Chair, there is the LTP report proper, which we will go through, or Wilma will go through. That allows a person to go in there and investigate exactly what's off track and what does that mean if you want to do that. If you're happy with what you see, then you're happy with what it is. So we have a similar page, Chair, for community resilience, environmental stewardship, regional leadership, and whakahauki te mana, each showing the relative expenditure in their activity areas that sit under that group. So if I could perhaps point out page 21, which is environmental stewardship, rather than our environmental stewardship is, the biggest group of expenditure. The biggest focus, I expect, would be a way of explaining it. At the 30th September quarter, our budgeted expenditure was 5.6 million, 4.5 million, with revenue of 5.6 million. And it encompasses, as you see there, the list of activities: biosecurity, compliance, consents, etc., laws, regional planning. Significant groups, significant activities within council. We have 10 levels of service in this group. 6 are on track. 4, it says, are not on track, but you'll find when you read the detail that some of those are actually very close to being on track, or the item, the way that we're measuring is perhaps, we've pulled those levels of service through here and put a brief name beside each of the levels of service, just to give you an idea what they are, whereas the actual level of service is quite complex in the name you'll find in the back. Keen to have feedback on the value of these reports, and questions on them, what they might bring to council, the benefit or lack of.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now that you've explained it a little bit better, it's actually easier to get, and I think going into the long-term plan, it becomes, we just see the long-term plan as an accumulation of these reports. So I think they're really good. So a couple of questions really. One is, does this really drive the GMs to actually make sure that the area work is actually done? In other words, they don't want to have yellows in here, they want to have greens and be on target. The other part of that is this a way of us finding out that there is some work that is, if I said low priority, not really important, can we actually find them and take them out of our work streams because they are nice to do's, not have to do's. And I think we as a council have struggled with what should we be doing and what is nice to do, and it makes things look good, but in actual fact doesn't actually add a lot of value. We've actually moved on from when that work was actually important and it's become less important. So do we start to identify some of those? Because in priorities, we would be saying there's actually more stuff that's more important.
I'll answer the first part if I can, Councillor, and I think you can answer the balance. But these reports in the same format are available to the GMs for their own area, their own group. And they will have yellows and greens on there. So the strategy group will pick up whatever levels of service they're working towards. As for the rest of the question, I think I'll refer to the chair or the GM of strategy. The chair, the CE, sorry.
Look, I'll have a go first, and then maybe Wilma can come in and fill in the gaps.
Tony,
Not commenting.
We do a lot of work around aligning our work program with the levels of service. Because in below levels of service is a whole lot of work program. So we're looking at aligning those at the moment. It'd be fair to say there's work to do that. And that'll help us as a management team make sure that the various projects, the work underneath is actually all aligned. So there's an ongoing piece of work going on through the LGP around that space. And also, it's also linked in with our expenditure review that we're doing as well. So not only do we need to carry us, to make sure there's a couple of things. There's projects we're looking at, should they be stopped or should they have the same level of investment going into them? And then how do we fund the additional work we've got coming? So where does that fit? So Warren might like to add, fill in some gaps.
Sure, it's a great short form version. It's, the work that's there has been to not just align the work to levels of service, but as a result of that to change the levels of service, which is what you'll see coming through in the LTP. And when we do look at the narrative part of the LTP report in here, some of the amber areas will always be amber for this year. Some of them aren't really levels of service, they're outcomes, they're environmental outcomes. And so being able to focus on what is the service that we are offering the community in order to achieve that outcome is what should really be in the level of service. So science, for example, has an almost unachievable annual, a couple of them actually, levels of service because they're really descriptors of quite aspirational outcomes for the region over time, which in a quarterly reporting, let alone annual reporting situation, will be quite hard to actually achieve. So we've been focusing and we've been working with Martin Jenkins on how to actually describe the levels of service so they actually describe what we're doing rather than what the outcome will be. But the planning framework lines up to outcomes. And we're working to make sure that those all line up right down to the project level of work so that we can see and test, do these projects deliver to levels of service and to strategy? And that's the work that's underway and it's pretty close to being completed, which is good.
Fabulous. Councillor Beard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think as the more you see them, the better your eyes adjust and know where to look. The term you familiarised yourself with yesterday, Neville, about infographics. This is infographics. Yes, this is infographics and more engaging, maybe more likely to catch people who maybe haven't perhaps prepared to put as much time into wanting to understand or visualise, see what's going on. Give me a picture and I'll see what I need to see, rather than to have to read all this to understand or read the numbers. But I think we're on the right track because I think people do like to see something visual, and as their eyes become familiar with what to look at, it's not all overwhelming. It becomes, you focus on areas where you want to focus on, and you can glance across quite quickly, see again has consents got it right now, or have we got problems still, or where's the money being spent? Where's it going off track? So I'm pleased that we're getting something like this.
Chairman Horrell.
I guess, it's nice and visual. I guess the one that sort of looking at and can't quite regard as the fish monitoring, which seems to be as far along as the green lines, and I'm thinking the others that are small, I can see here, they're not on track. That one confused me.
If I can answer that, Councillor, I do appreciate that. They are percentages, as it says there, not on track. It's fish monitoring is actually is a poor description of that level of service. It does actually, it's aquatic monitoring, which happens to include fish monitoring. So it was difficult to describe, and it's not to say that we aren't doing some things there, but it's just that we won't achieve the level of service because of the way it's described and put together. So the colour is one thing, the size of the bar is another. So we'll learn how to describe it better as we go.
Thanks, Tonya. Any other comments about those reports? I really like the new look, and Bruce has given feedback on how clear and crisp and obvious They are, and I really like the fact that we're connecting this with the next steps up the chain, across the chain. So well done, team. That stuff's really, really good. Anything else, Tony?
I think, Chair, that would be that report.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to note the report. Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Seconded Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Well done, team. It's looking really good.
The only comment here is it looks like the council is spending more than we had a budget. Their budgeted spending against budget is.
Oh, that must be the new councillors, surely.
Well, Madam Chair, can I suggest that a slight amendment to the order of service, as it were, and since we're talking about long-term plan report, maybe the narrative we follow with for the investment reports and the.
Yep. Depends on how quickly people want to have a cup of tea. I'm happy to keep going. That would take us to item 4. Yes. And then we'll jump back to item 2 after morning tea. Whenever that may be. So the long-term plan progress report? Yep. Yep, fits nicely, thank you. And maybe that's something we need to do in that order. Yep, thanks.
So this is a slightly improved set of narrative to, I think, the way that the narrative being presented in the past. It still has the on-track colours thing that we've used previously, and off-track and no data. As we've just discussed in the roll-up report and finance report, there are a number of ambers in here, some of which will be ambers all year. And it's quite clear from the narrative, and I think the narrative's improved significantly, that there is work going on. It's the nature of the way we described what this looks like in the level of service. I'm happy to just take your commentary and maybe ask questions rather than turn the page on it, since you've turned the page on the previous report.
Councillor McCallum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the long-term plan comment, are you expecting that comment to go right through to the end, or are we going to see that change as it goes through? So, in other words, are you starting to build up in that comments that'll effectively take us through the 4 quarters, or is it quarter by quarter?
Perhaps actually visible quarter on quarter what the previous
No,
quarter's
well, I'm just looking at the biosecurity one on page 44. It's just got the work has been completed last year, so it's green.
Yes.
Now, is that going to be the same comment on each of those quarter reports, or are we going to have new comments? And I'm probably suggesting that we're starting then to build up those comments that are going to be actually in the long-term plan. And do we start to see them going through? Because the second part to that is, if there's differences, should we actually put them in a different colour so we can see there's been a change? Otherwise, we've got to compare last quarter with this quarter to see whether the commentary is the same or not.
Just thinking about the way that's laid out, because there's 2 different performance targets in that particular level of service. So the first performance target, which is that work has been completed, would need to continue for all quarters.
Yep.
But the one below it, which relates to the Regional Biosecurity Strategy Action Plan, it's on track because the work program's underway. So that commentary may change on that target. So I suppose to a certain extent it's what would you prefer to see, and is that the way that's presented? Would you like to see that?
Well, I think I get no problem in the first quarter because it makes sense.
Yes.
But when I put the second and third quarter on that, am I looking at the changes? So how do I know what's changing? So I'm just wondering whether we, like,
you
if
can see the quarter's commentary as you rolling along.
yeah, it's like track changing on the way through, so we can actually see this by quarter. Here's the change to the last quarter, because we're only seeing when we go to quarter 2, we're only seeing the quarter 2 commentary.
Yeah, that's
But I don't know whether it relates to quarter 1, which has been transferred through, or whether it's. So I'm just wondering how we actually start to multiply them layer by layer to get a sense that some stuff is going to be the same for obvious reasons, but the second part there is going to change. Yes, they're doing the work, but they could help up with weather or whatever. So I'm
Think about
just,
how to leave it out, I think that's actually quite a valid point.
yeah, so
But you'll see that on the first item actually, on page 40, level 33 on page 42, quarter one is amber, but you've just adopted the values and objectives work, and you'll see that will change to quarter two. So to be able to capture both of those pieces of commentary, I think would be sensible.
Yeah, without it producing a document of biblical proportions.
Correct.
Yeah.
What can we think about that?
but I like what's here, and I like how the first part of what we talked about relates to the second part. I think the second part is a summary of that in a different form. So I'm actually quite,
Documents the change.
yeah, so I'm actually quite happy with the relationship. I just want to make sure I can,
That you can see how it's advanced.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll think about how that's done, as you say, without it suddenly becoming 20 pages.
I don't need
Thanks.
24 pages.
Councillor Beard?
Trying to get the links between that summary front page on page 38 with how it fits and how it aligns with, in the case of say, environmental stewardship, which is the biggest number of groupings. So we've got almost 10 items there under environmental stewardship. And then if we step down into environmental stewardship that starts on page 39, how we then see the obvious link in the narrative to the line items on page 38.
So the second column, which is the levels of service, is the first column on the narrative. So process and determine resource consent applications is the top line, is one level of service, and that, so there's one performance target, and there's two performance targets, but only one. Actually, how does it, I'm actually now asking that question myself, it's the.
They don't quite match up.
There's one, I couldn't answer that.
Because there's more about to allocation of natural resources. I thought, well, what are we talking about there? And so I flipped down, and I couldn't see.
Levels of service are numbered.
Yep.
And when it was designed, it was hopeful that those numbers would refer to the detailed table. And so if we go to the detailed table and look for level of service number 1, which is detailed.
Oh, I see, this is your one, yes.
Yeah, so
Which is the same.
environmental stewardship, level of service number 1.
It's not the number of levels of service.
Yeah.
No.
So it is the number, same number, the corresponding, for the purpose of that, hopefully.
But the narrative on page 39 and page 40.
So the narrative on page 39 is straight from the LTP. It's a description of the actual activities that we undertake,
So, yeah.
more than it is of the current levels that are, it's a generalistic look at what we do. And then we go into page 41 where we describe the group and the levels there. Levels of service and environmental stewardship, there are 10.
I just wonder though, I'm just thinking about
8.
presentation.
Yes.
That it's
Yeah.
because we've got the environmental stewardship and we've got a similar kind of table, it looks like it's the number of targets rather than.
That's what I thought, because I thought it was
I was just
green,
gonna,
1 on track, 2 green on track, 3 green, so, and then
It could-
4 missed.
it could just be a matter of the order that those sections are presented, because actually if that environmental stewardship, page 39, wasn't between.
No, I agree, I think there's a really simple way of doing this
Yeah.
too, which is to change that right-hand column on that page to the target numbers that are on and off track in there and just number these things down the page. That's-
Yeah.
I can see a simple fix to that.
The content itself is not confusing, it's just the way it's
No, it's
presented, I think, is it?
I confess that I actually was counting down the right-hand side myself as though they were targets achieved, and I thought there's actually 2 targets in question, not 1, so.
Yeah, so does that cover?
Well, I think if we can use a little more clarity and
Yeah, I think that's an easy thing to solve.
Add here that one of the challenges here is we have 15 levels of service and 18 targets. We did initially, when we were revising this, split those combined ones where we have this confusion, and we ended up with 26. So we very hurriedly went back to 18 because that is what we report in the LTP. But the clarity around these levels of service are challenging in that they are actually multi-targeted, many of them. So we can try improve the clarity. The biggest improvement will come when we change the levels of service.
Yeah.
And trying to limit them to, and make them each independent.
Chairman Horrell, did you?
I think overall they read pretty well, and that LTP comment is pretty helpful, because that actually covers candidates. It's like, so it's hard to do fine tuning, but no, it's looking good.
Councillor McCullum, did you have something else to ask, or you?
No, I'm pretty, I'm not,
Excellent.
the only thing is, read on community resilience may not be the right colour. And it's just read is normally an issue deficit problem,
Yeah,
and we may just wanna,
it's just the headings, you mean,
there's nothing wrong, it's just a colour thing, because we go to the read as being, we need to target. So,
Readers for warnings.
Yes.
so maybe but apart from that, I'm actually more than happy with what I see here, the follow-up. Could you just go to page 54, 55, and you maybe want just to comment a little bit on that? I know that's different. Sorry, different seat. Don't worry about that. Ignore that.
Hold that
Ignore
one. Anything else on item 4? Great, I think we've had a good discussion on that, and might produce some other suggestions, which is great. Somebody like to move that recommendation, please? Thank you, Chairman Horrell. Seconded Councillor Beard. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay. Zipping back to item 2, unless you look thirsty. How are we feeling?
Madam Chair.
Okay, well, yeah.
Let's do investment report and then we'll have a break. Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. So, again, reporting on the period ended 30th September. Similar format to what you've seen in the past. We have taken out some tables that were perhaps not adding value and left in the summary table. So again, welcome feedback on that. As at the 30th September, the investment portfolio was 26.4 million. As I have suggested already this morning, the current balance to date is 27.5 million. The change reflected in here reflects the withdrawal of the $3 million, I think it was August, it might have been early September, and an increase in value, usual fees and charges of 1.1 million. The table here outlines our costs, including our quarterly management fees, which you might note are more, they now represent perhaps a greater percentage of the realised income, as the realised income decreases from interest and dividends. The fees now represent a higher portion. Page 26, statement of position outlines where our investments were at the 30th of June relative to where they are at the 30th of September. The net change of 1.8 million downwards is a result of taking $3 million out and adding back an increase in value of 1.1. So it's a combined effect, majority of which you can see came out of the cash balance that was sitting there at 30th of June. Actual performance versus benchmark, rolling 12 months, ended 30th September. Realised and unrealised income 7.48%. Most, if not all of them, well, most of those bar one, I think, are in fact better than benchmark at that point. So portfolio is doing its job in the market. And the graphics there just pointing out the volatility that we've experienced in the last 12 months. And finally, a little commentary there from JB Weir to say that they're obviously keeping an eye on it, doing some minor balancing or rebalancing. Other than that, the portfolio continues to do what it was designed to do. Councillor McCullum.
We took about 7 million out of that. Is that 3 part of that 7?
3 is this year, 7 was last year.
So we've actually taken 10 out. I was hoping you weren't going to say that.
Stony silence.
If I could elaborate on that, councillor, the $3 million was to fund, is in advance, as I said, to fund this year's deficit.
Instead of running overdraft, which I don't think we should have, we take it out of the funds early and don't run overdraft.
You know, I understand what you've done. I was hoping the 3 that you took out to do that was actually part of the 7, but it's actually we've taken out 10 over 2 years.
Yes.
And
And with
the
it-
question that follows on from there is how sustainable is that?
It is part of the long-term planning discussions as to how we fund deficits going forward. At the time, we didn't and don't have a debt policy. Of the 7 million, we're also through nearly 2.5 to fund property purchase. And
Thank you.
Chairman Hall?
Yes, I know it's only a snapshot, but actually, it's the first time I've seen the benchmark, speaking about the benchmark, and just about everything about property, and 7.48% on a rolling average is remarkable. Okay, you can't bank it, but I think it probably, the greater leeway we've given our investors, and you can sort of see that where things are sitting, seems to be working quite well in a very volatile situation, but it's quite encouraging that in these times we are sitting where we are actually. It can change on a month-to-month basis, but it does sort of show that
Result if it was my money. So I'd be happy with that result if it was my money.
Councillor Beard?
What goes up quickly comes down quickly. But it's I guess encouraging. My question really though is, we've also got a currency that's now hit 70, and at what point will we might see a foreign currency effect on their overseas portfolio roll through when that gets reconverted back to New Zealand dollars?
it's a good question. I would suggest that portfolio would have been ahead bar that. I mean, when we looked at this earlier in the year, the exchange rate was 62 US. So it's been quite a headwind for the portfolio, if you'd like to look at it that way. But that is also part of that balance and a diversification balance. Should it turn around and come back, you would see some more increase in our portfolio. The international portfolio is a little diverse. There's a bit of diversification between the US and other currencies, but the significant balance is actually in the US market. I think, Chair, it would be, we have had in the past, the portfolio managers come to an OPAC meeting, so I think that we should add that if it's not already on the annual agenda, timely to consider those invitations.
Thanks, Charlie. Councillor McPhail?
Yeah, just a couple, just to carry on from Lloyd, like the 3 million, there was quite a bit of discussion about whether that took out, and there were certainly people around the table didn't want it. Didn't think it was a good idea, but that's democracy. You still get it funded somehow. Obviously the Dow Jones at 30,000, the highest it's ever done, and you've just said we're in the US. Yeah, it's going to, and things would be good just to bank this, and this is where I think we want 4.5% or something as the long term. Is that right? I mean, trying to get 4.5% for the 5, but
The Cco is now seriously out of date. Yeah.
but it's highly volatile, and there's so many things going on. But maybe once Trump's removed completely, when he decides he's going to remove himself, things might settle down a wee bit. Who knows? But we've taken a lot of money out of this in due course. We're not paying out a lot of money in overdraft either, so.
Owning land's always a farmer's attitude. I said owning land's always been a good farmer's attitude. You can see it, you can manage it, you don't normally lose it, but equities, you run the risk of all the great gains, and then goodness, what do you use that stuff for now?
Thank you, Councillor Beard.
So that's balanced, we've got a balanced
Philosophical
portfolio.
question.
We've got good
There's the
assets.
item, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
I'll
Chairman
second it.
Worrell. Seconded by Councillor McCallum. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. We will take a 15-minute break. So we will be back here at 25 past 10. Thank you very much. Do we need to suspend the live stream while we have a break? Otherwise, people will watch us
Give them a fishbowl to look at us.
munching on biscuits or something. Dry biscuits. We keep.
Tracking back up. It's to do with the housing crisis or ways to cool your blood.
That's what they're playing at, isn't it? The Reserve Bank's can decide whether it goes into negative or it goes up.
Thanks,
So
Fiona.
the other bias seems to be, I think perhaps it's going to go the other way rather than lower. So if interest rates are not going to rise, that tends to support currency. Because
Interest rates rise.
Oh no, folks.
Just people worry what they can afford for service.
Right, am I back to the grindstone? We are now, just to clarify where we are on the agenda, we still need to cover off item 3, which is the Civic Financial Services report, and item 5. So we'll do them in that order and then move into public excluded after that. Okay, so item 3. The half-yearly accounts for Civic Financial Services, and I think Amy's going to talk us through that.
Oh, well, just very briefly,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Chair. I just want to note that this is a half-yearly report, not the yearly report that's sitting in the plan at the back. So we'll get the plan at the back updated in relation to that. It's really for you to receive the report, but just wanted to acknowledge the significance of this. This for us as an organisation, we have 73 staff members who have their KiwiSaver through Civic, and they have about $3.5 million invested in that. We also have 45 members who participate in the superannuation scheme with 2.5 million invested. So, and that's our current staff. That's not our former staff members who have left and become individual members who will still be holding funds through them as well. So really for you to receive the report, but just understanding the context and the significance of that for us.
Councillor Beard.
I just think I picked up a small, but it's not insignificant, error in the account.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I feel that they've got the referencing incorrect. At the top of each column, you've got the year and what you're referencing the dollar amount below. So they've got dollars in millions, and then they've got so in that, my understanding of that, the administration fee is 1.4 billion, where it's not. So I think they should be 3 zeros instead of M.
You're on page 32.
When it comes to looking at the numbers, because they're not that big an organisation
right,
that
yes,
they would be doing.
okay.
If you had a point 1.469, let's say, and have administration fees, then that might be correct. I
One
think,
would hope so.
but if it's not 1.469 billion, so I don't know whether they need to be informed that perhaps their numbers are.
Well, I was in contact with them to get actually that data. I'll just ring and ask the question. Follow it up. Yeah.
Chairman Hall?
So I guess, you can't really tell from this how competitive they are, but this is an organisation that we joined at one stage, and a couple of years later they pretty much went belly up and pulled out of the insurance side, and they've reverted to basically the superannuation type. So I always sort of wonder when you get something that sets up and moves into that, is because funds at risk of just about all the employees in local government. They're probably fine and just sort of trying to work out what sort of percentage they're charging, but 450 million is a significant portfolio. A bit like the other one, because you're looking at things at the top of the page. But yes, well, unless we had a Bruce Robertson who goes around all of other councils and probably can't answer that one much better. So.
Good news. So through you, Chair, they do have quite low administration fees. I think that's one of the benefits that they provide to staff members.
So would somebody like to move that recommendation with the
Verification.
clarification of that figure?
Happy to move.
Thanks, Chairman Horrell, seconded Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Right, flicking across now to the item 5, which is the annual activity plan. New-ish format there as well. Amy, are you going to speak to that?
Tanya,
Oh, Tanya?
speak to the collective.
Thanks, Chair, Amy. Have we not seen this format before?
I feel like I have, but I wasn't sure whether anybody else had.
Yes, sorry, Chair, I think I have too, quite a lot. So for those who haven't, we've tried to split up the finance and risk meetings and move a lot of the text that was in the middle of the previous table. Just allowing us to see the nature of the report and simplify it as the bottom line, and then group the risk reports together and group the financial reports together. At the very back, page 55, we've got some indications of forward work that needs to be developed. Other than that, I think the key point here is the TBDs around the dates. There are dates actually in the council calendar already. We went through this yesterday with Jan to be sure. So the next date, the next meeting is not actually a risk meeting. And it's going to be Q2. It will be the 24th of February. Was a slightly earlier date, but because of various availabilities of councillors, it has been moved to the 24th of February. There will be a risk meeting on the 1st of April, and quarterly, the third quarter report will be the 20th of May. So they will flow through as per the agreed council calendar.
And that should be being distributed before Christmas. Yep.
We've already got one, but this is fine once you get your head around it. But there may be that we actually have to have the odd meeting, extraordinary meeting as it were, just because of things that come at us. So I just don't want to take away the fact that we have to wait to a meeting. If there's something that we need to deal with, then let's deal with it.
Yep.
Even if it's only a one item meeting, we may need to have a prelude.
And I would hazard to guess that we'll be in and out of here quite a lot for a whole lot of reasons, so we can always coordinate some of that if need be, but certainly sticking to a rigid timetable for those incidentals is not a problem. Anything else about the activity report?
Can I just add a couple of
please.
things, just in relation to the financial Cco reporting? Ideally today we would have been presenting the RSHL annual reports, but their AGMs actually today. So that's not possible, so we have to put that forwards. And we are chasing Great South for their annual report as well.
Thank you for that. Just one other thing. I see the A's data report, we've got it in November and in the third quarter. Is that enough, Tanya, to keep on top of that? I'm just concerned that there is if I said loose talk in the community about people not paying their rates as they have problems with some of the government policies that are coming down. We're seeing some ginger groups emerge, if you want to call it ginger groups, but groups coordinating around rules and regulations, and one of those things they have talked about is not paying local government rates. Are we going to be on top of that? Because it's one of the risks of business is that you send in accounts, you don't get paid.
It's a key focus for the management. So I would like to suggest that we'd be on top of it, and if you would prefer to have more reporting, then we're happy to accommodate that. But at the moment, I think, and I look at this, and today you don't have that report. This report here has been created perhaps by another party other than myself, so we can I would suggest that we change that to the next quarter and bring the rates report to you, or the debtors report to you in the next quarter. And I think it may even be a better time because it's post the,
Yeah, so 6 monthly would be better, and I'm probably suggesting that you go, the other one would be full year, but if there's anything that comes up in the middle that if we're seeing a trend emerge or some other thing that we need to look at, maybe we should look at that separately.
we do have 2 reports in the year in here, but we can certainly move them I think Councillor McCullum is suggesting that we do the age debtors report in the second quarter and the fourth quarter. And I agree that would be appropriate.
It's one report that I like seeing because again, it does highlight whether there are problems in the organisation and or problems in the community.
Yes.
And if the timing's better in those quarters, then that makes perfect sense. Yep. Great, thanks for that. Anything else from councillors? I've just got something from a couple of items from Bruce that I want to raise on his behalf. So Bruce's comments around risk and assurance. He's keen for us to define our top risks and integrate them with broader risk management framework that Neil will be working on. And the assurance framework, quoting him, I think we need to consider the nature of the assurance we are receiving and consider some dimension of internal audit, which is entirely lacking at the moment. So, Tanya, do you want to comment on that, or councillors?
I'm not engaged with that part, to be fair.
No. So,
In terms of, so I know that Bruce and Neil had a conversation about the top risk and risk framework, and I think you all participated in a conversation workshop with Bruce probably about a year ago, or maybe it was like just before Christmas, I think it was. Yeah, and he showed you some of the types of frameworks that are available and things that we can be working towards, and that's part of the broader risk work that we've been talking about to you in terms of driving forward. So we're thinking that we'll be running. I missed the meeting that Bruce and you had, but running a workshop with you sometime probably in the first quarter of next year in terms of doing that identification work. In terms of the assurance framework, it's almost like there's 2 sides of the same coin there, because that's part of, how do you manage your risks, how do you make sure you're getting that quality assurance, and we can shape that up with you as part of that program of work.
If I may mention, I think part of that, if I'm understanding Bruce correctly, is we've been through a insurance exposure through the floods, and we want to go back and just make sure that are we happy with the level of service we got? Was it in a timely manner? Did we cover the right things? Was it at the right amount? So that we've actually got some good eyes on what cover we've got.
Oh no, this is assurance. I think for this group he was referring to rather than insurance.
Oh, okay.
yes.
But happy to take the point by that as well.
Also valid.
My previous comment still stands. I think would be good for us as an organisation.
Thanks, Councillor. Chairman Horrell?
Yes, just endorsing that. After the floods, I think that we'll probably be looking at insurances across the board, not just internally, because the result of the latest flood, maybe some of our disaster reserves on the rivers could be kept or could be lower, because I think it's time we have to have a look at all those things. And it's a risk thing, it's across the organisation. In some cases we might find we're overcompensating, so I endorse the idea of having a review of insurance per se, actually.
Councillor Beard?
So the work we did with, was it Mary Beth,
Yes.
Where's that at? Is that sort of concluded or is that still ticking?
No, that's ticking along as well. We're looking to use a risk leadership group to drive the aspects of the risk management framework within the organisation, I guess from an operational point of view, which will feed in, but to the overall programme of work. But I think there's a specific piece of work that needs to happen around this table about understanding what the significant strategic risks are for the organisation that we need to have an ongoing lens on and reporting on as well. So there's sort of like, how do we manage risk, which is the Mary Beth programme of work, and the what risks are we managing?
Well, it's identify risk and then how you manage it.
Well, and my understanding of the assurance part of that is how do we identify what those risks are, what assumptions and information are we using to make those decisions, because that's got to be right before we can correctly identify the top risks. So it's a
And I just
connected thing.
comment about, there was one entity that thought it was nearly bulletproof, had so much money on investment, so well cashed up for an event, and then that event happened, and then they lost all their money, and that was EQC, Christchurch earthquake. So let's not underestimate what our reserves are worth now for disaster, and not recognise that over time that deflates. Costs do increase, and making sure that we aren't underinsured in a sense or underprotected. So I know what Nicole said, we are covering insurance on some of our assets, but we've got to be careful that we don't think we deplete so much and then find the big thing comes along and we haven't recognised our obligations or what could be out there.
Thanks. So I think it's sufficient just to have those points noted in the minutes. I don't think we need to take any further action on that, but we need to keep it front of mind because that risk work needs to happen as soon as we possibly can. Thank you. So that brings us to perhaps somebody moving the annual activity plan. Thank you. Councillor Callum, seconded by Councillor Cook, because he blinked. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, carried. That takes us to, please, the public excluded section of the meeting. Mel, would you please share with us the reasons why?
To enable council holding the information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities, to protect the privacy of natural persons, and to prevent the disclosure or use of information for improper gain or advantage.
Thank you. Somebody like to move that we move into?
I'll move.
Thank you, Chairman Hall, seconded by Councillor Beard. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.